you. I'm going to jump in and share a little bit about who I am and why I'm talking to you about this. My role is Director of Transition Services with Velocity Advisory Group. And so basically what that is I come into organizations that are getting ready for some kind of leadership transfer. Maybe they're selling their company, or maybe they're handing it off to a successor. But my job is to really help them work within that organization to build value in the business. And before I joined Velocity, I was as the CEO and owner of an IT services firm, and I grew that company over about an 8-year period and sold it in 2016. And so all of this ties together very neatly, because when I went through that process, it was really quite eye-opening. It was incredibly interesting to learn all of the different ways that really do drive value in a business. And often it's not what we expect. So this is the model that Velocity uses and that I use when I'm working with companies that are trying to prepare for some kind of transition. And you'll see that there are several things that make sense around building value in business: financial health, having strong infrastructure, great equipment that works. All of those things make great sense as to why they would drive value. But you'll see that independence from owner is the central piece of our model. And I'm curious if any of you have any ideas or insight as to why that might be. Let me move the chat.
Sometimes owners disconnect when they sell the business. And if they're the major driver in value, if you're buying it, you lose the value when they disconnect.
Absolutely. So you take that owner out, they could have a beautifully running company. Everything could be perfect, but you take that owner out and the thing falls apart. And that doesn't just apply to owners, that applies to anyone in a leadership position. So the whole point of this webinar is to help us think about how we can build teams that can operate autonomously from us as leaders, so that if we miss a day, miss a week, or have to leave for whatever reason, that organization is still able to operate just fine without us. So it sounds kind of counterintuitive, but hopefully when you see it framed that way, it makes a little bit more sense. And so this is really about empowering our people and empowering our teams to work without us present. So when you think about the term empowerment as it relates to work, what are some things that pop up for you? What are some elements that might describe empowerment? And just so you all know, I used to be a therapist in a previous life, so I'm really okay with silence. So I will wait you out until I get feedback.
So a team that's vocal and willing to speak out.
Okay, yes, a team that's vocal. Also, being able to share in the power, that's another element of empowerment. Being able to delegate not just power, but authority but responsibility to your team and know that that's going to be handled. It's about giving people the ability to make decisions on their own without you. So all of these things kind of come together as pieces of empowerment. So what's at stake if you have an organization or a team that doesn't feel very empowered? What do you lose? Well, we've already talked about the fact that you lose some elements of value, right? Because your organization isn't as valuable if it's overly dependent on you. What else?
You lose new ideas.
New ideas, exactly, innovation. So if your team doesn't feel empowered to think outside the box, to generate new ideas, you're gonna lose that element. You're gonna lose your edge. What else?
You can lose your people.
Lose your people, yep. You could lose efficiency. It's not very efficient if you're spinning around like crazy, doing everything, and you've got members of your team that are underutilized.
You can lose your customers too.
Yep. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, oftentimes the top level of the organization is not the one that's closest to the clients and getting all of the feedback, and therefore able to move strategically in the direction that matches market, and therefore can be a little bit out of touch if they're not actually creating an environment that's empowering to the staff below them. So you end up not having the company meet the requirements of the market as the market changes over time.
Yes, beautifully said. Anything else?
Along that same lines, you could increase risk. So if you don't have people who feel that they are empowered to make those changes or bring those things that could create risk for your company to the light, then those things just go unseen and could tear away.
Yeah. And the likelihood of you being able to have your eyes on everything as the leader is small, right? You need those eyes and you need that visibility into the organization. And you're going to get that if you've got a team that can that feels equipped and confident in thinking and making decisions without you. Okay. So just an interesting little statistic. When employees are empowered, 67% of them are going to go above and beyond. When they're not empowered, 4%. So maybe you can build a team with that 4%, but might be hard to find them. So what does this look like in practice? What does empowerment look like? What is it and what is it not? So anything that you want to add? I know we touched on this a little bit already, but is there anything else that comes up for you when you think about what empowerment is or what empowerment isn't?
Well, it isn't micromanagement.
Right?
But it also isn't letting employees feel lost and not helping guide them when they need it.
Right. Yes. What else?
Creating time to listen and actively communicating that you're listening and hearing.
I like that. Active listening. That's a key piece that you just said.
It
Okay.
is encouraging, I think, to team members to be empowered.
Mm-hmm. Any other things that it's not?
I was going to say also that in both what it is and what it's not is levels of delegation might be using that as a tool so that
Yep.
you're communicating the expectation for empowerment and boundaries.
Yep. Aubrey just gave you all a spoiler. That's okay.
My bad. Sorry.
No, it's good. So yeah, so it's giving others the appropriate authority to make decisions versus relinquishing all authority. So we don't want that scenario. And I've seen this where you get a leader that just reaches kind of their max point. And they're like, I just can't do it anymore. You do it all. And they throw it at their team and their team flounders, right? Because they haven't been able to build up that skill as they go. Effective delegation versus delegating without, I can't see, plan or consideration for others. So how many of you on the call have had a scenario where your leader just gives you a task, but does not give you all the information you need to make it to deliver on that task? Right. Incredibly frustrating, especially if you're really invested and you really want to do well and you don't have the information you need to do it. So it's delegating the right way, giving the right amount of information, making sure that they can deliver. Trusting in others' capabilities versus micromanaging. If you want to deliver the message that you don't trust your team member, micromanage them. Releasing control of every detail versus delegating, but still staying overly involved. So releasing control of every detail, that's hard for a lot of us. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. And I will go into our flexible delegation model, which really can help with that. Enabling others versus stifling, sharing information versus withholding. Transparency is a big thing for a lot of leaders, particularly top level leaders and CEOs. There's this, and it comes back to that sense of control, right? You don't know how much information you should be sharing. It is possible to be overly transparent, to give your team too much information. And if they don't have the context to process that information, it can create anxiety. It can be very stressful. But more likely and more often, we see scenarios where leaders don't share enough. So there's something that really helps people become more invested in the work that they're doing when they know the why behind it, when they know how what they're doing is contributing to the bottom line, to the team, how that's helping the client or the customer. So the more information you can share, the better. And my personal philosophy, which is not everyone's, is I'd rather err on the side of sharing too much as opposed to too little information. That's just my personal philosophy. Okay. Fostering innovation versus limiting creativity. And we touched on that a little while ago. And the thing about fostering innovation is it's great to think, okay, I'm going to create an atmosphere where my team can think outside the box, can be creative, but you have to be willing to create space for failure within that too, right? And that's where a lot of people struggle. So when you're thinking about this, like how you can create an atmosphere where your team is able to experiment more, do so in a way that creates a playground for them to be able to make mistakes. And you can do that at a smaller level, right? So as they're building their skills, they're making little mistakes here and there that aren't, gonna bring everything toppling to the ground. But start doing that so that they can be building those skills. That's a great way for them to build confidence as well. So it's a lot easier to handle small mistakes and build your skills than it is to just kind of be thrown into the fire and then you have something majorly catastrophic happen. So fostering innovation, flip side of that is also making sure that you're creating space for them to make errors and not punishing them for that. Okay. I love this task. Your most important task as a leader is to teach people how to think and ask the right questions so that the world doesn't fall apart if you take a day off. How many of you feel like the world does fall apart when you take a day off, or you feel so stifled if you take a day off? Like there's just so much pressure on you for how far you're falling behind in your work. Just give me a show of hands. Anybody? Yeah, it's incredibly frustrating, and it points to often that feeling points to, okay, I really am just taking on too much. And if you're taking on too much, it's very possible that other people on your team are being underutilized. So we're going to talk a little bit about how to create this environment where you are able to empower them by asking the right questions, by giving them the right information. And so we're going to talk a little bit about leading, coaching, and managing. So what would you say is the difference between these three?
Leading is, in my opinion, could be wrong, more strategic.
Okay.
Coaching is enabling, helping them figure out how, asking the how questions and asking about them, where they want to go, where they want to grow, and whether it's like from a career perspective or on this project. It's more about enabling them. And then managing is managing a task.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty much. You just nailed it. So you can think of it as three separate hats. You have your leader hat, you have your manager hat, and you have your coach hat. And all leaders need to be able to bounce between these three. If you spend all of your time in one, you're probably not being as effective. You aren't being as effective as you could be. So that was a great explanation. I'm going to give you an example. So let's say you are managing an apartment complex, and you're responsible for facilities and maintenance. And you can tell that I'm speaking outside of my realm of expertise here, I'm sure. But so let's say you're managing an apartment complex and you've got two entrances that just need to be cleaned. They're dirty. There's gunk all over them. You need to get them cleaned, but you need to use a more harsh cleaner. So it's got some chlorine or something in it, right? So you go to your leader, you go to your supervisor and say, hey, how should I handle this? If the leader says to you, okay, I want you to do it next Tuesday and Thursday. I want you to send out an email to all of our tenants that it's going to get done on Tuesday and Thursday, put some signs up ahead of time. Is that leading, coaching, or managing?
Managing.
Managing. It's very tactical, right? It's like, just this is what you're going to do. There's no critical thinking on the part of the employee, right? It's just, this is how you're going to do it. If that leader says, oh, okay, this is we need to make sure that we think through this. Let's think about how it's going to impact our residents. How can we make sure that they are notified in a timely fashion? We want to do this on a day that there's not a lot of foot traffic. So we probably should do it on Tuesday and Thursday because we know we've got a lot of students in this building. Is that leading, managing, or coaching? Anybody? Leading. It's more leading, right? Because you're giving them some guidance. You're helping them understand the why behind the decisions that you're making. And then let's say they come to you and you're the leader and you say, that's a really interesting question. How should we handle this? How can we do this in a way that doesn't inconvenience our residents? So you're probing them to be thinking about this. You're probing them to build the skill so that next time they don't need to even approach you with this. They know, okay, we need to send this out. We need to send out notification ahead of time. We need to, these are the steps that we need to take to make sure that this happens in a way that's serving our overall purpose, which is to make sure that our residents are comfortable and taken care of.
Well, there's only one left, so it's coaching.
What was that?
There's only one left, so it's got to be coaching, right? Yeah.
Right, it is coaching. So yeah, exactly. You've got leaders are about the why, about helping you understand the big picture. When you're managing, you're about the what. We're just going to get this done. And when you're coaching, it's about the how. How can we do this in a way that fills our mission? Again, you need to spend time in each of these. And so my question to you is, currently in the work that you're doing, where do you find yourself spending the most time? How many of you feel like you're spending the most time in the managing role?
Heather, is it possible that that would vary based on which team you're working with or which employee you're working with?
Yeah, I would think so. And that's something to look at. Like if you find yourself in the what role a lot with someone, if you find yourself managing a lot, does that point to an area that maybe they need to work with them to develop some skill? Also, it depends on the type of situation. So if the building's on fire, it's unlikely that you're going to want to spend some time coaching them right then, right? It's like, this is what we need to do. Let's go. Let's resolve this crisis. You might go back afterwards and say, okay, everybody, gather around. Let's talk about why this happened, how we can improve this so it doesn't happen next time. So you can spend some time leading afterwards or even coaching. But it just depends on a lot of times it depends on the situation. But again, if you find yourself a lot of time spending, if you find yourself spending a lot of time in that management role, it's probably indicative of something. And you may want to look at leaning more towards the why and the how when you're leading. Make sense?
I'd also, I'm thinking too about new employees. When a new employee starts, I'm much more into the what. We're doing what. I filter in a bit of the why so they see bigger picture, but
Yeah.
there's definitely more managing with doubles.
Yeah, and sometimes that makes sense. And also, I think it depends on the role. If you want that person to be able to think critically long term, I think at the beginning it's a great opportunity to focus on the coaching side. So get them to start, thinking like, okay, ask them some probing questions like, how could we do this, after they understand, of course, the basics of the role? How can we do this better? What do you see? Or again, helping them understand that big picture. I think at the beginning is a great time to really get them. The more they understand the big picture, the more bought in they are, the more excited they are about what's happening. So I think that's a great time to spend some time on the why as well. Onboarding, when you have a strong onboarding program, there's a lot of time spent on the why of it, like going over the vision, the mission, all of that sort of thing. Anybody have anything they want to add? Okay. So we're gonna talk about delegation now. Where's my little stat here? I gotta remember what the question is that I'm about to ask you. So what percentage of companies are concerned with their workers' delegation skills? What do you think? Throw out a number. Be risky. Courtney, I see.
88.
What was it?
88.
88. Oh, that is that's I actually expected it to be higher. It's 46. It's 46% of companies are concerned about their workers' delegation skills. At least they're willing to admit that they're concerned about their workers' delegation skills, right? How many do you think, what percentage do you think are willing to invest in training their workers on delegation?
15.
28. 28.
Let's say 25. I should have said 25.
So there's still definitely a discrepancy there. It's just something to think about as we go into this. So what are some reasons that you don't delegate? What are some thoughts that pop up when you think about delegating that cause you to pause?
Well, sometimes it's a time, because while delegating actually gives that person a chance to experience something new and grow and be able to do it next time better. If it needs to be done yesterday, sometimes it's just faster to do it yourself. But then next time you're in the same boat of having to do it yourself. So
yeah, time definitely is a factor. What else?
competency of the person you delegate to. Yeah, but that comes back on you as a leader, because you need to build their skills.
Yeah, you don't feel that you can trust them to deliver on it.
Micromanagement from your own boss and
Okay.
on results.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So you're feeling extra pressure to make sure that it's done well.
Sometimes the processes aren't in place. Kind of getting to the first point that it's harder to delegate it. It's just quicker to do it yourself because you really don't have things clear enough to be able to pass to somebody else.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. So you don't want to train them the wrong way. Yeah, all of those great examples. I'm going to go into some of these a little bit more. So I've got about 7 that I've seen other people bring up a lot, or I've actually personally dealt with. So I'm going to share them. So I don't have time to delegate. Yes, that is. I think a lot of times when leaders get to the point where they realize that they need to delegate, they're already capped out, right? So there's like no time. Like, how can I possibly find time now to stop everything that I'm doing and to teach this person how to do this thing? But if you find a way to do that, if you just make it happen, even though it's incredibly uncomfortable to do so because you have all of this other pressure and you may have to let something else drop to create the time to do this, that investment of time, assuming that you do it well and you delegate well, and we're going to give you that model so you know how to do it, that time is going to compound, because every task you train someone else to do, that frees you up moving forward. So I don't have time to delegate. I would challenge you that you don't have time to not delegate. It won't be done the way I would do it. Probably not. It's probably not going to be done the way you would do it. And that might not necessarily be a bad thing. Maybe they have a better way of doing it. Maybe it's just different. But is it, the question I would ask is it most important that it's done perfectly the way you want it to be done, or that it's done successfully and well? And it might be that you can be okay with it being done not quite at 100%. Also, again, if you want your team to get better at it, they've got to have time to practice it. So this is a great way to do that. I'm the only one who knows how to do it. Why? That's possibly true, but it doesn't have to be. And the only way that's going to get fixed is if you teach somebody else how. If someone else can do this, then I won't be needed. I think you see this, I think, more in mid-level management than upper management. At least that's my experience. I think this points to a devaluing of yourself as the leader. Chances are that whatever that time that you're freeing up by teaching someone else to do this, well, number one, you're training them, you're giving them an opportunity to grow, right? Which that's part of what being a leader is. It goes back to that whole coaching piece. You want them to be developing, so you want to give them space to grow. But also that time that you're freeing up, you are now able to devote that to other areas within the organization. You're able to devote that to being more strategic. And I mean, if there's one problem that pops up in almost every coaching client that I work with, is that they don't feel like they have enough time to be strategic because they're caught up in the minutia and the day-to-day. So here's an opportunity for you to receive multiple benefits. You're teaching your people, you're developing your people, you're creating space for yourself to focus on things that are bringing a higher value to you in the organization. So don't devalue yourself by thinking that you won't be needed. You're devaluing, not devaluing, but you're doing a disservice to your team and your organization if you're spending your time on stuff that really just isn't the best use of your time. I want to do, oops, go back. I want to do this because it's fun. So when I had when I had my my company, I had a real bad habit of sneaking into my finance person's office and taking all of the checks that had come in for the day and going back to my office and inputting them into our accounting software because it was fun for me to see the balance going up. Definitely not the best use of my time. Definitely took away from her being able to continue to fine tune her accounting skills, right? But I did it because it was fun. And it was like a little bit of a stress relief for me. So if you find yourself doing that sort of thing, of course, we want you to be doing things that you find to be fun in your work, but maybe just keep that under check a little bit. No pun intended, I said check. I've always done it. Well, yeah, that's I just don't really have an argument for that because it just, for me, that's not something that I've ever been able to buy into. Just because you always done it that way doesn't necessarily mean it's the most efficient way or most effective way. So I would challenge you to just, if that pops into your head, immediately question it. And I feel guilt when I delegate. So again, I think this goes back to that. Well, first off, let me make this, I want to change the view here because I'm curious. How many people who have their video on have felt that way? You feel guilty when you delegate? Okay, a couple. Yeah, because you feel like, oh gosh, this is something that's beneath them. Their skill set is above this, right? It's just not, you just feel bad. But again, it points to the value that you're bringing to the organization. If it's a task that someone else can do and you're not handing it off, particularly if it's a task that really doesn't require a lot of competency to do, there's probably something else that you can be doing better with your time. And so it's not an affront to the person that you're handing it off to. It's really in the best service of everyone, because if they can handle this small, minute task, and you're able to put your head on something strategic for the organization instead, or I'll take it even a level deeper and make it even more uncomfortable. If you're able to devote that time to your own self-care, you're doing everybody a right? So that's one that I struggled with a lot, and it held me back as a leader, frankly. So I encourage you, if that's something that comes up for you, challenge it. Okay, I'll get off my soapbox. We're going to talk about the levels of delegation now. So some of you on the call have seen this before, yes? Okay, a few of you. So I'm going to just go, I know for many of you it's new, but the idea here is 6 levels of delegation. The 2 at the bottom, you're not really doing a lot to empower your team at that level, right? So at level 2, they're getting some critical thinking skills. They're having to do some, there's some effort involved in like gathering the information to bring back, but there's really not a lot of empowerment there. Levels 3 and up is where you really start empowering them to make decisions. You're starting to empower them to act autonomously without you. And of course, you really, it's really great when you can get to level 6 and they just go out, they do it, and they only report back. Actually, they don't even report back. So it's completely on them. They own that task. Is there, when you're looking at this and you're thinking about your team, is there a level that you kind of typically default to as a leader? Is this idea of rank stacking your delegation, is that something that's kind of new to anybody?
Well, it just kind of, it goes back to the earlier comment that it depends on the situation, it depends on the task, it depends on the person, their skill level. So, but I would say I'm not at a 6 because my leader is not at a 6.
Right. So this is dependent on the level of skill of the person that you're delegating to. And this is a great way for you to help develop their skills. So you can go to them and say, hey, I've got this task. Right now, I'm going to give it to you at a level 2, right? And a lot of companies will take this model and they'll make sure that their team knows it and can speak it. And so when you are handing something off, you can say, hey, I'm giving this to you, it's a level 4. And they know exactly what they're supposed to do at that level, right? So that's a kind of a goal to get to. But when you're working with your direct reports, yeah, say, I'm going to give this to you at a level 2. In a couple months, I really want us to be at a level 5. So let's build out a plan to get you there. So this can be an opportunity for training. The beauty about it is it makes things crystal clear. So another thing that it does is it allows for conversation. So Dan, I think is maybe still on the call. He shared a story that I really liked, and I'm going to steal from him. He was working with a woman who had a direct report that was just really struggling. Like they couldn't get communication to work. This guy was competent. He was knowledgeable, but for whatever reason, when she would delegate something to him, it just would come back a mess. It just wasn't working. And so she went to him with this model and said, okay, here's the task. What level do you feel comfortable taking this on at? And she's thinking he's going to say, well, maybe a level 4, level 5. He said a level 0. And when she asked him to explain, he said, because I feel like anything that you give me, we would be working on together. We would be accomplishing this together. So that was a really powerful bit of information for her as a leader, to know what needed to be communicated there with that direct report. So use this to facilitate conversation, use it to create clarity, and use it to build and develop your team. It's a great tool for that. Okay. So let's play with this little scenario here. And give me just a second, I need to get to where I can read this. Okay, so you're a leader with people willing to take on more work. Your plate is extremely full and you're struggling with delegating tasks and projects for fear they won't get done. You finally decide to give a project to a few of your team members to tackle, and you give them to that at a level 4. They're excited to do the work. They're excited to do the work. You transition information and give them what they need to move forward. The next day, you're copied on an invite for a meeting on the project to attend the meeting. I'm sorry. The next day, you're copied on an invite for a meeting on the project you just delegated. You decide to attend the meeting. You walk away with action items, and so does your team. What do you all think about that?
Can you remind me what a 4 is?
That is act. Let me go back so you can see it. That is act and report results.
I shouldn't have attended the meeting.
Okay. Why did you?
Because I wasn't, I'm guessing I wasn't comfortable delegating. I was afraid they were going to miss something, or I was afraid, there any number, or, I was afraid that I would lose visibility in the company, that they might mess it up. I don't know, any number of reasons.
Yeah.
Could it be that you thought that was going to be the reporting part? No,
Probably not.
probably not. Yeah, shouldn't have been
Let's
there.
say
I
this
agree.
project was going to take a few weeks. Yeah, so you delegate, but then you go to that meeting. So there's a lot of messages that you could be sending your team with that. But one of them is that you don't quite trust them, right? So if you don't trust them, and their act of offering to include you in that could very well have been, hey, they're going to want eyes into this. They don't trust us yet. They need to see that we're actually going to deliver on this. So there's a lot of reasons that you could have done that. But it's something to really pay attention to. So why did you choose to attend? What was the message? What was the messaging that you were sending them? What would have happened if you had just let them run with the project? Like, was there anxiety or fear in you around that? So thinking through things like this, like when you delegate, making sure that you really are stepping back and giving them, letting them deliver, being there, of course, as a sounding board if they need it, but really trusting them to deliver on that project. Okay. Another just cool concept I think is helpful when it comes to delegating, we're actually wrapping up, is the idea of 70%. So if you're in a position where you've got a task that you want to hand off, and you have a team member that can deliver at least at 70% of what you're expecting, it's probably okay to hand it off to them. You can coach them on the additional 30%. If you're doing it at a level 4 or level 5, level 3, 4, or 5, hand it off to them, know that they're going to take it 70% of the way there, coach them on the additional 30%. If you're going to hand it off at a level 6, you've got to be okay with them just delivering it. You need to step out, let them own it. Again, it might not be perfect, but it's probably going to be successful. If you trust them at that level, it's going to be successful, and you need to step back and let them do it. I've got some chats coming in I need to pay attention to here. Give me 1 second. Yeah, so, okay. Oh yeah, I keep the levels of delegation posted in my office. That's right, that's a great idea because it's a great communication tool. Okay, so that's basically what I have for you today. Let's just review really quickly what we've covered. Creating more autonomous teams drives value. Hopefully you see that, even if you're not looking at this, just from the idea of the benefit it has for members of your team to feel like they are contributing, to feel like they are empowered, recognize that it actually impacts the bottom line. If you take nothing else, take that. It's going to be better for your company if you do this. Creating autonomy through empowerment. That's how you do it. How can you empower your teams to be able to be more autonomous, to have more decision-making ability, to be more independent. And know when to lead, manage, and coach. Recognize that you need all 3 of those hats. Pay attention and think through when you need which one. Is this a moment where I've really got an opportunity to help them develop their skill set? Is this a moment where I just need to get them to see the big picture? Or is this a moment where we just need to get through this thing and take action? And identifying your own blocks to delegation are, it's great to have the model to refer to, but if there's something internal in you that's preventing you from actually utilizing that model, you want to take stock of that. Use the flexible delegation model. It's such a great tool. And remember that 70% rule. So anybody have any questions about anything that we've talked about today? And you can just shout it out, use the chat, whichever works for you.
Do you have, because obviously some people have seen it before, but do you have the levels of delegation in something you can send? Or
Sorry, say that again.
Do you have the levels of delegation, like that 1 through 6? Do you have that in something you can send?
Yes,
Or
yes, we do. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That would be awesome. I don't have it in my office.
Okay, we'll make that happen for you. What else? How does this sit with everybody? Anything that jumps out at them? So I have lost my last slide. Oh, there we are. So what we're going to do from here, we're going to send out a list of questions. It's about, I want to say it's about 9 or 10 questions that are going to help you get an idea of where you're at as far as leading more autonomous teams. Just kind of a quick check, like a little quiz for yourself. At that, you're going to review that list of questions. You're going to choose 1 or 2 to focus on, and then you're going to identify what you need to do to improve on that and set yourself a timeline. So it's just a little tool, little value add that we think you'll get some use out of. We have, in addition to this webinar, this is part of a series. We have another webinar coming up. Lauren, do you want to touch on that?
Yes, I will. So our next webinar is going to be the first Wednesday of April. I think it's April 7th. And Ben, it's going to be the start of a 3-part series that Ben Bowman's going to help us out with. And he's going to talk about kind of the extremes that we hear in a lot of inspirational advice or quotes, and how sometimes the best advice for you is the exact opposite of what someone else needs to hear. So this series is going to be about focusing on improving our decision-making in our personal lives, leadership roles, and with our company culture by learning how to filter out the noise and act on what really matters for us individually. So in that follow-up email that Heather's going to send you, I'm going to have a link to that webinar if you're interested in signing up for that one.
And I'll also add that I spoke a bit about empowerment. I only kind of scratched the surface. Velocity actually has a series of trainings on empowerment that are really phenomenal. We've got some experts in the field that deliver just a really killer training. So if that's something that you're interested in for your organization, just let us know. You'll have my contact information. I'm going to reach out to everybody with a follow-up email. So any other questions for me while you've got us? All right. I hope you guys found this valuable. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
See you on the flip side.